Hi, y'all. I think we're going to get started now. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Really excited to get into this partnership opportunity and go over NYC Speaks with all of you. First, I want to pass it over to our wonderful partner at the City Hall, Artie Coley.
Hannah, I think I need you to enable my video to start. But anyway, it's nice to see a lot of friendly names. I'm very excited to have you all today. Just for awareness, this is a public-private partnership, so you've been receiving emails from HRNA. You've also been receiving emails from me, some of you, and if not, and you want to connect, I'm happy to. Really want to thank you all for your support in helping get the survey out there. And we're really excited to jump into the second phase of community conversation. So we're going to go through that process. I will pass it to Hannah to kind of walk us through that, but I'll be on throughout the webinar in case folks have questions specifically for me or just like city government's role in this project. So Hannah, please take it away.
Thank you. So today we'll just go over, do a little brief introductions and then go over NYC Speaks briefly for those who aren't familiar with this project. From there, we'll provide an overview on the partnership opportunity and get into details around the application process, what is really the scope of work, timeline, and then the eligibility and selection criteria. And then we're really hoping to spend a bulk of the time answering any questions that you all have. So with that, I'm going to pass it along to Tina to give you a little bit of an overview of NYC Speaks. And as a reminder, we're going to save the questions for the latter half of the session. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to write in the Zoom chat and we'll be sure to answer. So Tina.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Artie. I just want to quickly talk through New York City Speaks overall before we dive into the community conversations piece, which is the focus of today's conversation. New York City Speaks is a 6-month engagement and government transformation process that will run approximately through the end of June, really culminating in what will hopefully be, the first sort of community-driven community-informed budget and really emphasizing implications for the city's longer-term strategic plan. So what will we end up with in 6 months, right? We will have quantified the mandate for the new administration, meaning we're putting hard data to how New Yorkers want to see the city move forward on key priorities and issues. The first step in that process was the citywide survey, of which many of you were involved. Hopefully you all took it. And that concluded a few weeks ago, and that really forms the basis for this next phase of data collection, which is the community conversations. And that's where we'll be taking the survey findings back to communities through large and small events held all across the city so that community can really play a role in interpreting the data. We want to hear directly from communities who provided us with this data, what they think we should be taking away from it. That is really what data equity looks like to us. And we will leverage the data from the survey and through what we hear from community conversations to create an action plan, which is a truly actionable plan of things the administration can and should be acting on. And just to mention, in parallel to the community conversations, we'll also be partnering with city staff to elevate the ideas of the city's workforce on what they think can be done to help improve city government and better serve constituents. We'll also be training dozens of city staff ambassadors to participate in the engagement process and hopefully bring government a little bit closer to its constituents. And our hope is to do all of this in a way that institutionalizes this approach to engagement and creates a lasting culture of change in the way that the city partners with communities to tackle some of the city's most pressing issues. Do you want to go to the next slide? Thanks. And as mentioned, we recently concluded the citywide survey and are thrilled to share that we managed to capture the perspectives and priorities of more than 60,000 New Yorkers, which equips us with some 3 million data points. And that makes this the largest issues-oriented survey in New York City's history. And to give you an example of what we found, next slide, please. Respondents to the New York City Speaks survey cited housing as the #1 factor that could make their neighborhood safer. And as part of community conversations, we really want to understand for specific communities what housing interventions city government can take towards that end. Is it building more affordable housing, preventing renters from eviction through things like just cause eviction, reducing homelessness, including through some combination of those two things. We also want to understand the interplay between responses to different policy questions. So, for example, here, respondents in Staten Island cited increased police presence as a factor that would make their neighborhood safer. But that same group also responded that increased accountability for police misconduct is a top priority for improving community-police relations. So unpacking that further in order to arrive at actionable items. Next slide. And then quickly, another example, New Yorkers really across large swaths of the outer boroughs and upper Manhattan want to see more neighborhood recreational centers that provide free or affordable spaces for academic and enrichment programs. And as part of the community conversations, we want to understand more about communities' visions for such spaces so we can explore, the activation of spaces that really meet the specific needs of individual communities.
So as Tina mentioned, we're here to talk a little bit about community conversations, which is the next phase of the project following the citywide survey. So community conversations builds off of the survey data that we received to really unpack about, does this resonate with residents? What are the reactions to this data? And build kind of another input into this process, creating a robust kind of qualitative data set to inform the subsequent action planning workshops. So through these events, we'll be hosting, there'll also be an opportunity to just learn more about city government and then come together to create kind of consensus around the priorities to include in the action plan. So we're really trying to look up different ideas, some stories, and just overall sentiment from folks. So what that practically looks like is each event will start with a kind of welcome and introduction, followed by a section on each issue area module. So in each event, you'll be able to select varyingly 2 to 3 issue areas to really unpack and get closer in on, which you can see on the right range from public safety to education and youth development, racial equity, housing and neighborhoods. So it really runs a bunch of different topics, and you'll select 1 to 3 modules to really dig into. So it takes 30 minutes per module. And then there's 15 minutes at the end for a report back and closing. So that's really what an event will look like. So today, we're really focused in on this blue box, applications for a microgrant to host multiple NYC Speaks events. But there are other ways to get involved in community conversations. We'll be also having, we'll have an opportunity for folks who are interested in hosting their own meeting to do so, and we'll be making the toolkit and guide publicly available. And then there's the third opportunity to just attend a community conversation event. So this is just one way to get involved in this next phase. So focusing in on applying for a microgrant. Hopefully folks have been able to read up a bit, but if not, that's all right. So it's just some basics to go over. We're asking that events happen between March 21st to April 15th during that time frame. And they can take the format of a dedicated meeting or plug into an existing meeting. So say your organization already convenes a group once a month. This could be, this could take that form and take over that kind of monthly meeting. We're asking that each event have at least 15 attendees that are kind of unrepeated individuals per event. And importantly, I know that organizations have varying capacity, and other organizations, you may partner with closely in the past. And this is an opportunity also to partner with organizations and to jointly host these events. And lastly, we're asking, we really wanted the application process to be simple and easy to fill out, understanding that this is a tight timeline. But we are asking folks to share with us by March 17th, if you are selected, a work plan that gets into a little bit more detail about what the plan is for the event, whether it be, which ones are in person, which ones are virtual, what days, et cetera, so we can stay coordinated across all kind of events happening across the city. So in terms of how we'll support the organizations that we select for this process, we'll be offering twice a week office hours. So if there's any questions that arise, we'll be on hand to answer and help problem solve. We will, as mentioned, be providing kind of the facilitation guides and any content that's required for the meeting. So we'll be providing like outreach language to use, flyers. We'll be providing, again, the facilitation guides, the worksheets, and kind of the report back templates that you'll use. And lastly, if an organization requires support to confirm venue space or needs additional facilitation support, we can figure that out on an ad hoc basis. So that's just something to elevate. In terms of the timeline and process here, today is February 28th, where we're having the webinar. We're asking for applications to be submitted by March 8th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. That gives us a very brief turnaround window where we'll be reviewing applications. On March 11th, we'll notify those who are selected. And then on March 17th, as mentioned, we're asking those who are selected to submit a work plan and to start hosting community conversations during the March 21st to April 15th window. So one thing that's really important to note, if you've been on the website, is that there's different tiers of partnerships. So to walk through each tier in short, Tier 1, we're asking the Tier 1 partners to host 8 to 10 total events, with at least 2 to 4 being in person. These events should be open to the public, and we're looking to advertise these events on our website. And given the number of events, the funding availability will be between $5,000 to $20,000, depending again on the number of events and whether how many are in person versus virtual. Tier 2 partner is a total of 2 to 4 events with at least 1 to 2 in person. And again, these should be open to the public, and we'd like to be sharing these on our website. And so the funding available for these events will be between $1,000 to $5,000, again, depending on the number of total events. And lastly, Tier 3 is really to support existing meetings to support existing groups that meet to have this kind of conversation. So if there's a hard cost like snacks or printing that would support these groups to have this type of conversation, this is kind of for the Tier 3 partnership. And so we're able to support anywhere from $250 to $1,000 for that kind of partnership. And, because of limited funding, we will, we unfortunately can't, this is a competitive process, and we'll be evaluating applicants along these criteria listed on the slide. So we're looking to understand what population you serve, where geographically are you focused, what is your capacity as an organization to deliver on this, and previous experience, and then like what topic or thematic focus you're looking to really lean in on. Again, we're trying to work with folks that can serve a diversity of New York City residents across geography, language, and various populations. And so that's how we'll be evaluating applications. And then importantly to note, Tier 1 and Tier 2 partnerships are really for only 501c3 nonprofit organizations that are located in and serve New York City residents, while Tier 3 partnerships can also be eligible, individuals can be also eligible to apply. So I know I went through that very quickly, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions. So I'm going to pull down my screen, and so we can go through some of the questions. But before I do, just a reminder that the application is due on March 8th at 5 p.m. Eastern time, and we will be notifying of award on March 11th. So I will pull down my screen.
So Hannah, Tina and I have been going through the chat to address questions, but just want to elevate some so that everyone who's attending today is aware. Like, first and foremost, all of the materials are and have been translated into the 10 local law 30 languages. I don't know if Hannah, you want to kind of talk through the facilitation guide and other resources and kind of just quickly spell out what else has been, what else will be available on a multilingual basis.
Yeah, of course. All the facilitation guides and worksheets and other content that will be supportive, that will be used for these events, will be translated in the 11 languages that Artie just mentioned. So language access is really important to us, and we want to make sure that this is accessible to all groups.
The other thing I just want to quickly highlight, it wasn't a question, but again, like, folks, please continue to post questions in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, we can unmute you and you can answer it live. But one question that was asked was whether this was shared with community boards. We did share it with community boards through a lot of agency partners, like the Community Affairs Unit that I know was actually talking about this project at meetings they were attending. I want to highlight that we literally doubled our survey responses in a week, and that's because everyone really mobilized. A lot of community partners, a lot of you helped spread the word on social media, really talk to the community. And so we're trying to build on the momentum. The survey was open for a month, and the reason we're really working at this fast timeline is because we want to ensure that we're having these conversations while the city is doing a lot of the strategic planning, which is happening, now and in the coming months. So that's why we are trying to stick to it. But our hope is, we can kind of build on it. And while a lot of people, participate in the survey, there's still a lot of New Yorkers we still have to reach. So our hope is also through this process to work with you closely to ensure that, we reach those New Yorkers. Hannah and Tina already kind of addressed this in the chat, but just want to understand exactly how data will be shared with the community through community conversations. So I don't know if you can quickly speak to that.
Yeah, of course. And that's a great question. So as I mentioned kind of in the slide deck, there's going to be different modules on different topics. So like public safety. And I know Tina talked through that graph with you all. There'll be kind of materials that share the data out, and we'll give kind of a guide for you all to be able to walk through the data with participants. And the intention is first to just review the survey data for the selected topic, and really ask some probing questions. So I know Tina's example that she shared on with the map really elevated housing as a really the number one focus area. And so we'll want to unpack that and understand what is it about housing that is really a priority, and we want city government to really focus in on. So that's going to be kind of the nature of the conversation. And again, each issue area will have kind of a breakdown of the responses.
I see S Health, who's the person who asked the questions, raising their hands. I'm just going to allow them to talk in case they have a follow-up. You hold on. I've asked you to unmute, but I don't know if you're able to speak.
Yes, it's actually S. Heath, and thank you very much.
Well, S. Heath, I apologize. Clearly,
no problem,
I
no problem at all.
misread.
My question, I saw your response that summary data will be provided, but I'm wondering if community organizations are able to get down to the actual detail of the data, because I know in our community we've been exploring doing a survey, and so if it's by zip code or if by neighborhood, are we able to get more than the summary? Are we able to get down to the exact data points?
Yeah, and I mean, certainly our intent with this project is to be as transparent with the data as humanly possible. We do want to make sure that we're reaching, sufficient sample sizes when we get down to like the zip code level and cross-cut it by race, ethnicity, et cetera, so that we're not trying to draw conclusions from a data set of a handful of responses. So that's the only kind of caveat that we're working through now, like what is the most granular level of data that we can provide in order for the results to be meaningful. And we certainly intend to share all of that with the community-based organizations, as well as the public writ large through our website.
Is there timing around that when that sharing would take place?
Certainly before the community conversations launch, because that will be the basis of the conversations, but it'll take us a couple of weeks to get it up and running.
Thank you.
Thank you for these really good questions, and apologies again, Heath, for mispronouncing your name.
No problem.
I see another really good question from Madeline, which is, once the process is complete, how will the community stay involved in using the data? I'll let Hannah or Tina speak to like exactly how the data is going to be shared. I mean, the next stage after the community conversations, like Tina previewed, is the action planning workshops, where we're really going to try to bring in subject matter experts from within and outside of government to really analyze and look at the data and come up with a set of recommendations. Tina and Hannah can speak to how the data will be publicly available. I mean, the report, the hope is that that will be available. But I will also say that we're hopeful that this process will become like a regular reoccurring thing that the city engages in, where we really do center community generated data when we're thinking about policies, priorities, and programs. But Tina, Hannah, do you want to kind of get into the granular of how exactly the data will be shared out?
I'll just add one thing, and then Tina, please pipe in. But the survey again was one data set, and so that was one input into this process. The community conversation will generate, our intention is to generate a robust qualitative data set. So the work we hope to, hopefully we'll partner with many of you on, is creating another set of data, and then we'll bring both together to ensure that we're informing the ultimate action plan. So it's both the survey and the community conversations, I think, are really important in that.
Tina's nodding.
Tina, do you have
to me unless she has something to add?
No, I think that covers it. That seems sufficient. Thank you.
Fabulous. The next question is, how are you defining community for community conversations? Is it geographically, by neighborhood? And are you also including communities with shared interests? So this is from Karen. I hope I'm pronouncing everyone's names correctly. Karen. Hannah or Tina, do you want to address?
Yeah, and part of the reason I didn't supplement the last question was because I was typing this response, which is, for our survey outreach, we targeted the neighborhoods identified by the city's task force on racial inclusion and equity for outreach, given that these tend to also be areas that often go unheard in decisions that affect them most heavily. So we'll be kind of continuing with the neighborhood definitions there and supplementing with those relied on by the Department of City Planning. But we're also, in addition to looking at the data, just by geography, we are exploring engaging specific subpopulations, including, formerly or currently incarcerated folks, to have a community conversation focused around public safety, housing, the issues that affect them most directly, those living with disabilities, et cetera. So we're doing both. And I think this gets to kind of the second half of your question about, communities with shared interests. We're doing both geographically based, but also issue based.
And I think you hit on a really good point of like, how are you defining community? I think there are so many different definitions of community, and every community has unique aspects that, will make this data really robust, and we want to ensure it's representative. So I think the main point is we really just want to ensure that we have the data shared out. So maybe Hannah, you can quickly just talk on like what the requirements are in terms of like the info that's being shared. But just something I want to quickly highlight before Hannah does that is we do have a level of flexibility, because we do understand a lot of CBOs and organizations already do this work, which is why integrating into existing efforts is something that is totally supported, and something that we acknowledge oftentimes will be the case. We are also in the process of standing up some events, and what we're hoping ultimately is there will be a shared calendar for events that are public, so that New Yorkers can attend and join them as well. But our hope is to support existing work. That's why we do have a range of what the requirements are, and some can very well be events that you're already hosting that are in line with the mission of NYC Speaks. But Hannah, do you want to quickly just talk about what the note-taking requirements are, and just quickly preview that?
Yeah, so during the event itself, you'll be going through a facilitation guide and asking folks questions. We ask that in each event, if there's at least one facilitator and one note taker. We find it's quite difficult to do both. And the note taking is really essential, so we can make sure that we're getting all the inputs from each conversation and bringing it into the broader process. So we'll be providing a note taking template so that whoever is the note taker can make sure that they're taking the right level of detail to bring it into the bigger process. And we'll provide training for both facilitators and note takers, so they feel well equipped to hold these conversations. What we are making sure that's really important is that after you have your event and have this conversation, we're asking all partners to submit the notes within 5 days, so we can make sure that we're doing a good job analyzing all the notes and bringing it into the broader process.
And I'm seeing a lot of, thank you so much, Hannah, for like talking through that. And a lot of this information will also be on our website, and we're going to walk everyone through this. We're not just expecting you all to just figure it out, but based on what we're sharing now, we'll have a session once candidates are selected, and ensure that everyone has access. And as Hannah mentioned, there's also going to be office hours offered. So if folks have questions, again, we are readily available to answer them. There are a lot of questions about like what exactly, like I see Bobby asked what the community conversation topics are. And I saw that Alejandra said they are the survey, but maybe Tina or Hannah, if one of you has it readily available, we can just paste the topics in the chat so everyone can look at them now. Or actually, Hannah has this beautiful slide deck, so she'll visually show you. But yeah, so here.
Yeah, these are the topics in this box right here on the right. So I know that we've given the example of public safety, but it also covers education and youth development, climate and infrastructure, racial equity, arts and culture, housing and neighborhoods, economic vitality and workforce development, health and well-being, gender justice, and civic engagement. So as Ali mentioned in the chat, these are the topics we asked in the survey. And so we have survey responses for each of these sections that will ground the conversation. That's where you'll start.
Thank you for pulling it up. And a lot of people are asking about the recording. We will circulate it after the fact. So if you want to rewatch it, or if you just want to make sure that you fully understood a section, we'll send that out. I see that Madeline has their hand up, so I'm gonna unmute them, and then Madeline, feel free to ask your question live.
Okay, thank you. I'm following up on a question I asked earlier, and thank you for that response. My question is, after all of this is gathered and items are submitted to the city for responses, how does the community, if you know, stays involved in the actual planning and implementation based upon what comes out of this survey?
That's a really good question. And I think part of our hope is that, and we're still, again, like we are figuring things out in real time just because it is a new admin. So there is a bit of us coming together and trying to really co-design solutions and ideas. I think one way is the action planning workshops, like, hopefully folks who really are, in the space and have thoughts and ideas, and we're still trying to figure it out, to have a few slots open for folks who really, want to weigh in. That's one way. But I think the idea is, like, when we look at this data, right, we're going to be able to look at what are the solutions that the community is really going behind, and think through, like, strategically, like, what can be done in the short term now, and how do we work with the community to ensure those projects are being done in a way that does center the voice of community. And then in the long term, like, what are things we can aspire to? So I think the big thing is, like, and why we are wanting this to be like a conversation that we're having, and really not just a conversation when things are fleshed out, but like from the very start, and work together. The idea is that by having these conversations and working together, then we can ultimately have this, all of this information and data centered in the strategic plan. Or, like, for instance, the Civic Engagement Commission is going to be doing participatory budgeting. Council members are really excited and want to hear. So in addition to hosting community conversations, we're also hoping to get decision makers to be present at some of these conversations so that they can hear directly from the community in terms of, like, what people's thoughts are, but then also start that dialogue. So there is continued communication throughout the process. I don't know if I answered your question thoroughly, Madeline, so please feel free.
You did. Thank you. That's quite thorough. Thank you.
It's a very robust process. And again, like, I think the city has done a lot of work in terms of cultural plans and things like that. But something that's unique is that this is something that Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright is really excited about, and is something that was kind of born during the transition. So I think it'll be really successful if we all come together. And that's why we want to have robust community-based organization engagement. We want to have robust agency engagement. We want to ensure leadership is behind the process, but also New Yorkers that really, are dealing with these different topics or issues on a daily basis feel and are empowered to share their thoughts with leadership. So it's a lot of work. We're still at the early stages, but also a lot of things have come about through feedback and ideas. Like, for instance, and Hannah and Tina can even speak to this, but we had an adult version of the survey, and the Department of Education felt very strongly that there had to be a youth version. So they worked with the HRNA team and created a youth survey that was available for New Yorkers aged 14 to 18. And they ended up being responsible for 18,000 of those responses in 2 weeks. So I think, like, also I want to say that we understand that this is an ever-changing landscape. We have to be flexible, and we also want to leave room for innovation and ideas. So if folks have ideas, we want everyone to feel empowered and comfortable to come talk to us, because the only way this will be successful is if it's truly collaborative. So I appreciate you asking that question, Madeline, because it's very important, and I want to make sure everyone also knows that we want to work with you all and make sure this is a success.
So my fingers are
And
crossed.
oh, thank you. And I'll just underscore, as community organizations across the city, the residents you serve the best. And I think that's really underscoring Archie's point just now, that if there's a way that you normally engage folks or convene folks, and you think that's the right way to move forward with this kind of process as well, please, like, let us know, because I think we want to elevate the knowledge you all have and go through that process as well. I'm seeing a question around, does the project include COVID-19 safety guidelines for meetings? That's a great point in acknowledging that this is an ever-changing landscape with COVID-19. And we'll definitely, we'll as kind of a project set some guidelines for how to navigate that. And I think with our approach, we wanted to offer a level of flexibility. So offering both in-person and virtual meetings to accommodate different comfort levels. I don't know, I think we'll, overall our guidance will be to follow kind of our local mandates, and then, we'll encourage the use of masks, and we can share some other guidelines as part of this process as well.
And just following that, Hannah, Bobby has a question. Due to the short turnaround time of March to April 15th, how strict are you about in-person conversations? Are all virtual sessions acceptable? Do you want to take that one, Hannah or Tina?
So I think for Tier 1 and Tier 2 partners, we are looking to have, a small subset of that total number be in person. I do understand that it is a tight turnaround time, and if you think that's, prohibitive, I think please elevate that to us, and we want to, be working with you all. But I think our preference would be to have a hybrid of the two.
We did this really well in a similar iteration of this work through something called Thrive 305 in Miami last year, where we did community conversations in a hybrid manner, both virtual and in-person options, including some that were entirely in person, some that were entirely virtual. So we expect, given the rates and their trajectory right now, fingers crossed, that hopefully we can kind of replicate that model here.
And I see Gregory has their hand up, so I'm gonna unmute them. And Gregory, feel free to ask your question live.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Beautiful. Can the tier 1 process be split in half? What, like, I believe it was 8 to 10 meetings. Could you tell me the exact amount for the tier 1? Well,
Yeah, Hannah's
Yes, it's 8 to 10.
Right, 8 to 10. So what I wanted to know is, let's say 8 to 10, can they be split in half? Can I do 4 in person and 4 virtual, or whichever one, or 5 in person and 5 virtual? Could it be split in that kind of way? Could that be done?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So if you see what Hannah has put up on the screen, it says 8 to 10 total events with at least 2 to 4 in person. So that means the remainder could be virtual. That being said, like, again, we have a level of flexibility. So if there's a rationale or there's something compelling as to why you're wanting to run something a certain way, if you note it in your application, we'll definitely consider it, because again, something that Hannah said and others have said, we understand that every community is different, and what will work in one community may not work in another. So we do want to have that level of flexibility. And so if there's a rationale or reasoning, if you can just include that, that will help us just have a better understanding of what each organization is proposing to do.
Absolutely. I will definitely indicate that in the application. We definitely have a game plan. I think that this is really, really timely for our community, and basically the ones that we reach are generally the voiceless, and I think we can bring them together in such a setting where they can express themselves in a way that I think is effective. Now, one last question. As an individual, I'll be operating under the auspices of a 501c3. Is that fine? Is that okay? I'm asking you guys.
Hannah, you want to address that?
So I think our position again is that for tier 1 and tier 2 partners that we work with, those have to be 501c3 organizations. And for tier 3 partners, we can partner with community-based organizations, so 501c3s or individuals.
Yes, ma'am. So it will be the 501c3 that will be doing the application for the grant. But however, I will be spearheading the effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think as long as it's clear that it's an organization applying for the funding versus like an individual, then that's fine. And I think you can detail it. Like this is like a unique opportunity because it's not like a traditional city grants program where we need to know like how many staff are working on it, like who the staff are. It's more like this is the output we need, which is here the community conversations. So as long as it's a nonprofit, a 501c3 or CBO applying for it, that is fine. We just want to be able to make that clear distinction versus like, and again, the reason why we have tier 3 is if there's smaller organizations, like you meet with your faith group or you're a student run organization and you want to apply for some funding just to buy food or snacks or whatever it might be, we wanted to allow for that, but that's tier 3, and tier 1 and 2 is really for, you know, nonprofits, community-based organizations that, you know, have the ability to really organize these events at the scale we need them.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate you. Thank you very much for answering my question. So what do we look for the application in our emails? Is that how that goes?
So the application is live online. Hannah or Tina or someone else on the HRNA team, can you please just drop it in the chat so we can ensure everyone has it? I am seeing more hands raised, so I'm going to now kick it to Michelle.
Hello. So I have a question. And I'm a high school teacher, and I have a couple of groups that I run, and I was trying to see how I can apply. And I did apply, but I really didn't know how it would be under, because I do represent an education institution. So I didn't know if that was a part of the tier 3 or could be considered. Did you guys hear me?
No, we heard you. I think Hannah or Tina, I mean, it's hard because we do definitely want to have school engagement and work with schools and students. Again, like for tier 1 and 2, we do need, like, that is a criteria. For tier 3, we're able to. I think maybe we can look at your application and get a better sense. But essentially, like for tier 1 and 2, like if you're applying under the umbrella of an organization, and they, you know, like everyone on the organization is behind it and will help promote and et cetera, then that's really tier 1 and 2. But if it's like you as an individual are hoping to just, you know, work with your community or bring it back to your school, then that's really tier 3. But Hannah, Tina, in case I'm misunderstanding, do you want to quickly chime in?
Yeah, I would
The
just
only
encourage
thing
you to still apply. Like, we are working closely with DOE, DYCD to organize some of the youth conversations, and those, you know, planning for that is already underway. But we can definitely like take a look at the kind of holistic set of applicants and try to pair where it makes sense.
The other thing I'll add is, you know, if we're encouraging folks to partner as well to apply. And so if there's, say, a membership organization you're a part of, maybe that could be the right kind of organization to apply and host this conversation. So I know that there's a bunch of different membership organizations out there that do convene individuals, but also smaller organizations. That could be a good forum to explore. it looks like there's a bunch more questions.
Should we give it to Alina? Because I know Alina hasn't asked a question yet, and then we'll get to others.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. One of my main question has to do with now the in-person meetings and the cost that's going to be associated with renting spaces or, at least paying for the eatery that's needed when people are in person versus the virtual. So is that going to be taken into consideration when we're getting the grant?
Yeah,
Correct.
that's why there's a range for each tier, because we acknowledge that in-person events cost more and there are more hard costs associated with them. So if you're planning to host more in-person events, we assume that will be reflected in the funding requested.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, should we, I see S. Heath has a question. Do you want to ask your question, S. Heath?
Sure. If you find that there are multiple groups in a particular area that are applying, once you have awarded, will you advise that group of others so that those groups can potentially, come together?
100%. And that's our hope, is that organizations and groups who serve similar geographic regions or have shared interests can find opportunities to collaborate together. Based on tiers of funding, we do want to be respectful of time commitments and how much time we're asking of folks. So like for groups that are getting the maximum amount of funding, we're hoping to have like a meeting with everyone. We're hoping to meet with everyone, but we're hoping to have like a specific convening where CBOs that are in those areas can also meet and talk, because if you have ideas, or we want to make sure we create space for ideas and information sharing, and also collaboration. So like if two groups really want to collaborate on an organization, we're allowing that flexibility. We just, again, like really want to ensure that we get the data we need to make this a robust process. We are being flexible in the methodology because, again, we understand that different communities have different needs. But yes, definitely want people to be communicating with one another, stay coordinated. And also we're hoping as much as possible for events that are public to post it on our website so that also New Yorkers at large are aware when and where these conversations are happening.
Thank you.
Of course. I see Michelle has a question, and then we'll go to Gregory.
Oh, I already asked the question. Thank you so much.
Oh, of course. I will lower your hands. So that we know.
Sorry.
No worries at all. Gregory, do you have another question, or is this a previous one?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Say that again.
Oh, I was just asking if you had another question, or if your hand was raised from a previous.
That's raised from before. That was pretty clear to me on my questions. Thank you.
Okay, fabulous. And I see Nuri, please correct me if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, but please feel free to ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much. Okay, I'm trying to follow along. I'm actually getting back to community after this pandemic freeze. So I'm a little rusty with following along right now. It's been a long ride here. Question, what is the goal besides the guidelines of how many attendees, the formats, the application, everything you just, what is the ultimate goal of your project, let's say in 12 months, way after the meetings are done, we submit all the paperwork? What is the goal of the project? And have you done it somewhere else? You said Miami, but I'm interested to see the formats that you're referring outside of our New York area to get an example.
Tina, you want to take this one?
Sure.
Yeah,
No,
sorry.
No, and this is a process that really a methodology that began in 2013 with something called Talking Transition, which was a 2-week process for de Blasio's transition in New York City. There was a tent in Hudson Square, you might remember, where it was really trying to open up the process of political transition as a unique moment of not only turnover within government, but also kind of a consolidated window of opportunity to really advance a community-driven agenda. And that model has evolved significantly over the last 8 years. We did a version in DC, in Harris County, which is, the 3rd largest county in the country, on behalf of Lina Hidalgo, and then most recently in Miami. And it's kind of evolved every time. I think Miami is the most directly analogous to the process that we're taking here in terms of its being not just a 2-week stint in the transition period, but really working alongside the administration to institutionalize the process and create sort of this feedback loop. And really the goal of the community conversations is to both gather additional data from community, qualitative data, but working towards getting consensus around these actionable items that the new administration can and should take. And that kind of gets hashed out for feasibility, et cetera, during the action planning workshops, but really coming into those workshops with a robust understanding of what communities writ large are looking for.
Thank you.
Well,
Am I still muted?
You
Am
are
I
not muted. Do
Oh.
you have another question?
No, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to give, I was
I'm
glad I
like,
didn't say
yeah, we're
anything.
ready.
So I'm going to talk to my family again.
Oh, well, enjoy. And again, like you mentioned a big point, Nuri, like we're still transitioning to in person. Like it's been a really crazy, challenging week globally with everything happening in Ukraine. Like there's a lot going on in the world. And so again, like Hannah mentioned this, we're going to be tracking everything from a health perspective. Things might change. This is our plan, but we want to have flexibility because we know that real life and things are happening right now. So just want to state that. I don't see any more hands raised. I don't see any questions we haven't addressed in the chat. Hannah, Tina, chime in if there are. But want to thank you all for spending time with us this afternoon. We will circulate this with folks. Hannah also shared the contact info, which maybe Hannah, you can just read aloud for anyone who's listening in. We will be available to answer any questions folks have after the fact. But again, thank you all so much, and really grateful to have shared this space with you this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you all. And a reminder to please apply by March 8th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Again, the website is nycspeaks.org/conversations. And you'll find there everything we went through today, along with more details around each partnership tier, the application requirements, and then the link to the actual application. We'll be sharing the presentation and the recording both on our website, and we can share it to all those who registered as well. So really, really appreciate you all tuning in and talking with us this afternoon, and hopefully we can partner with you all. So please apply, and looking forward to reviewing all the applications. And with that, I will end it. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.